Hey guys, welcome back to another American Hippotherapy Association live connection. I am Nita Miller, one of your hosts, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host Kate Scotty.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
It is great to see everybody here. I'm glad that you guys have joined us. We've got a couple of quick announcements before we get down to the nitty-gritty. Kate, tell us about the conference.
Absolutely. So we're just about 2 weeks out from our biennial conference. And if you haven't registered yet, there is still time. Conference is being held both virtually and in person in Denver, Colorado this year from March 14th to the 16th. And there's still availability in the room block at the Westin Hotel Westminster, Boulder, Denver, who's graciously hosting us. Virtual and in-person conference attendees will have access to a presentation from our keynote speaker, Dr. Karen Adolph, who's going to speak on infant motor development and its clinical applications. And attendees will also have access to 12 presentations covering topics from business and reimbursement to equine stress and behavior. It's a really wonderful couple of days to network and expand your knowledge as a therapist who incorporates equine movement. And while you're registering, make sure to register for our pre-conference presentation from Dr. Karen Adolph on the power of video and how it can be used to support therapy. You definitely don't want to miss it, guys. It's really a really spectacular few days, wonderful ways to expand your knowledge and your continuing education. And we all get continuing education credits for conference as well from APTA, AOTA, and ASHA. So definitely check it out.
I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good one.
I think so too.
Also, don't forget about AHA's member benefits. As a member of the American Hippotherapy Association, you receive a considerable discount to MedBridge continuing education courses, as well as free access to over 1,000 research journal articles on Science Direct. So definitely be sure to check those out if you are an AHA member. If you're not, join now. All right, Kate, are you ready?
I am so ready. Yes. And I think everyone else is too. I'm so excited about this topic because, everybody's really shown a lot of interest in talking about business and asking a lot about courses and other ways AHA will be supporting. So I'm just really excited to get everybody on and get chatting.
I think it's going to be a good one. I think it's a hot topic. I've seen it popping up a lot in the AHA Facebook groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, hopefully it'll answer a lot of questions that people have been having. I get the pleasure of introducing our first interviewee. If you don't know her, you've probably heard of her. Her name is Ruth Dismuke Blakely. She is a licensed speech-language pathologist and the director of Skyline Therapy Services in Edgewood, New Mexico. She has been incorporating hippotherapy into her treatment since 1982. She's an AHA faculty, a past AHA board member, and a lifelong horsewoman. She also just happens to be my mother. So welcome, Ruth.
Welcome. We're so excited to have you, Ruth.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
I am honored to introduce our next presenter, Mel. So Melanie D'Amico Richards is a New Jersey licensed SLP. I almost said New York because, the battle of the states, but is a New Jersey licensed SLP, as well as a board certified hippotherapy clinical specialist. She's been a treating clinician at her facility for 8 years, but has been involved with her organization for over 25 years. Melanie is currently the director of therapy services at Mainstream, the first organization of its kind in the state of New Jersey, and who is celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. She sits on the AHA Inc. board of directors, as well as numerous committees. And welcome, Mel. We are so excited to have you as well.
Thanks, friends. Thanks for having me.
All right. Our third and final interviewee is Cassandra Sanders Hawley. Cassandra is a doctor of physical therapy with a board certified specialty in pediatric physical therapy and is also the owner and director of Leaps and Bounds Pediatric Therapy in Norco, California. She has practiced physical therapy with pediatric clients since 2004 and specializes in early intervention and working with children with neurodevelopmental disabilities in their home, school, and clinic setting. She's a proud member of the American Physical Therapy Association and is dedicated to lifelong learning through extensive continuing education. In addition to practicing physical therapy, Cassandra is an adjunct faculty member at the University of Southern California. She teaches pediatrics through the curriculum, including patient management techniques and motor performance across the lifespan. Cassandra opened Leaps and Bounds in June 2010 in a small office in Norco with a goal of seeing just a few patients while focusing on teaching at USC. It quickly became apparent that there was a need in this community with rapid growth, and she opened up Leaps and Bounds. So welcome, Cassandra.
Hello. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Well, before we get into the nitty gritty here, I just want each of you to give us a brief rundown of your clinic, just kind of give us an idea. So Ruth, could you tell us a little bit about Skyline?
Sure. So Skyline Therapy Services is a full-time pediatric therapy practice. We offer physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech and language therapy services. Of course, we specialize in integrating equine movement as a treatment tool into all the other tools and strategies that we use. We've, as Nita said in my bio, I've been doing this full-time since 1982. For 25 years, we did adult rehab, but in 2009 or so, we went over to doing straight pediatrics.
Perfect. Thank you. And Mel, tell us about Mainstream.
Sure. So Mainstream is a nonprofit organization based out of Oldwick, New Jersey. We are an outpatient pediatric, primarily private pay facility. We do have a few adult clients here and there. I feel like we're dabbling in that a bit more than we have in the past, which is very exciting. We currently offer OT, PT, and speech and language services. And just like Skyline, we do specialize in the use of equine movement in our treatment, but we also have an on-site therapy clinic, as well as trails and lots of outdoor space that we can conduct our treatment sessions in.
Wonderful. Cass, tell us about Leaps and Bounds.
Leaps and Bounds is in Southern California in a city called Norco, and we are PT, OT, and speech private practice. We actually have a solo corporation, for-profit, and a nonprofit hybrid to bring our treatments to our community. We currently serve about 1,100 children per week.
Wow. Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited too, because even just hearing you each introduce your practices, we're hearing about the differences between each of them and what those practices can look like. So I'm really excited for all of our viewers who are joining us. I don't know if everyone saw, but from all over today to learn a little bit more about business structures.
Yeah. So Kate, do you want to start us off with our first hot topic?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I heard everyone say while we were introducing, a couple of us mentioned that we were for-profit, nonprofit, hybrid. So I was hoping that we could get into that a little bit first. Cass, would you like to tell us a little bit about the hybrid structure?
Sure. Yeah. So I started Leaps and Bounds Pediatric Therapy as a solo corporation, just me, and really wanted to use hippotherapy in my practice. And that quickly became apparent that I needed some help to support that in my community. My insurance programs weren't going to reimburse enough to make it a viable practice. So we also do work with school districts as well, and charter schools and things, as well as the clinical setting, and then utilizing the horse. So we, about a year or two in, we developed a nonprofit. So we have Leaps and Bounds, and we have Friends of Leaps and Bounds. The nonprofit Friends of Leaps and Bounds has a mission to support the delivery of equine assisted activities in our community. So our nonprofit supports all of the horse related expenses that are associated with our practice, so that we can take insurances for service that may be a really traditionally lower payer. So we're able to take Medi-Cal programs. Medi-Cal is Medicaid in California's version, and it's a traditionally very, very low payer. So that nonprofit helps us break even on those treatments so that we can continue to serve the community while still having a viable business model.
That sounds so interesting, and I think it's a really smart way to set things up. Was that a challenge to set things up that way?
It was. I actually, thank goodness for this advice from an attorney. I took my whole practice to an attorney who specializes in nonprofit formation, said, convert the whole thing to a nonprofit. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And she said, why would you do that? That's your baby. That's yours. You started that. That's your name. That's your corporation. And you may not think so, but someday it'll be worth some money. It'll be something. And you will have full control over it. So when you do work with a nonprofit, you have a board of at least 5 members who have control over your organization. So I have full control. I own 100% of the shares of Leaps and Bounds. And it was really the best advice. We have contracts in place that control the flow of money back and forth, and rules, policies, procedures, staff. And it's worked really well. And I think people really see the value in that as a business owner, I would have had to step back and say, at least in my state and my community, I can't use the horse. I can't do it, or I'm going to have to charge a cash pay rate that is outside of the reach of 99% of my clients in order to do that. So as a business owner, I could throw my hands up and say, I just can't offer this product or service, or I can say, I'm going to try to fight with insurance to pay me more for this. And we know how that goes. Or I'm just going to raise the difference myself. And our community of supporters for our nonprofit have grown so substantially. They see the differences. There's no concerns about how things flow. They see that they want this in the community. We're also the only practice in our state that will accept insurance as reimbursement. That's all the other practices in California just don't, because of our low payment rate or for whatever other reason. So it was very important to me that we allowed access through insurance for this. So the nonprofit was the answer.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was an incredible challenge, but I mean, listening to you talk about it, I don't think there's any question in your mind or in any of ours hearing you talk about it that it was the right decision for your practice.
Yes.
But I know that other people do make different decisions for their practices. So Mel or Ruth, would you like to speak on the decisions you made as far as the way your practices are set up?
Sure, I'll speak to it. I don't think I mentioned actually when I was telling about Skyline that it too is actually a nonprofit, and it was incorporated in 1982 on September 21st. And so you're kind of bound by the rules of the Internal Revenue Service of the time that you incorporated. And so actually I only have to have a board of 3 members, and I'm really a family-owned nonprofit. And at the time it made sense because tax laws were different. It was a very, I was doing research. You could get really good quality horses donated, and it made sense at the time. And certainly in 1982, none of us had any idea whether or not this was going to be viable. And so it seemed like I might need to do some funding. Ironically, here in New Mexico, although we're considered one of the poorest states in the country, we have excellent reimbursement rates, particularly our Medicaid. And so it was more a matter of figuring out what my break-even point was and how many therapy sessions I needed to do to be competitive in terms of breaking even and then being able to offer my staff competitive wages. And so certainly it's been a 40-year odyssey, but we are in great shape and have functioned as a nonprofit. I don't actively do any fundraising. And in fact, the only real use of the nonprofit for me is there are people who are interested in Skyline that will make gifts to it, but that money is not factored into the general operating budget at all. That money will be specially designated to purchase equipment or to offset co-pays for families in need or something like that. And we are probably 99% reimbursed through our health insurance contracts and our state Medicaid. And it's sad in a way, 72% of our children in New Mexico are on Medicaid. So the fact is if our Medicaid rates weren't highly competitive, those kids wouldn't get services. And so it sort of created an interesting dynamic where we can actually, afford to take insurance and take Medicaid and make it all work. So
we're going to touch a lot more on the reimbursement aspect.
Right.
But before we dive into that bombshell, Mel, give us a rundown a little bit about how the therapy practice is set up at Mainstream.
Sure. So Mainstream has been around for 50 years. We were founded in 1972 by Octavia Brown, who is one of the, I guess, the founding members of what is the industry kind of in the United States. And so we were her pride and joy back in the 70s. And so we were very much an established therapeutic riding facility, back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It wasn't until about the mid 90s that we started having hippotherapy sessions. As we all know, terminology has evolved over the years, and the way that we do business, for no pun intended, has also changed over the years. And so we are a not-for-profit that is governed by a board of directors. We have done a very good job as an organization, myself, my predecessors, as well as our adaptive riding program, of very much separating out our two programs. When our stakeholders come, they know that they are coming for either adaptive riding or OTPT speech. And if someone comes in with, maybe they don't have the right idea of what they want, we try to educate as best as we can. We are a private pay facility. We do not accept insurance. And that has to, we'll speak more to that later, but that has to do with some decisions that our organization has made. But that's not to say that that could change in the future.
Awesome. Mel, thank you so much for speaking on that. And so with that being said, I think it is important that we transition to talking a little bit more about reimbursement, insurance, different ways that people pay, because I think that is an extremely hot topic in, I know, all of our Facebook groups and all of that. So I want to make sure that we talk about that a little bit. So Mel, just because you were talking about it, do you mind touching on a little bit on reimbursement and the private pay structure and things like that?
Sure. So we right now, and it just really comes down to manpower. We don't really have the manpower right now to deal with insurance. When I do pre-auth or anything like that, and it takes me 2 hours on the phone just to get a pre-auth, I can't imagine what the opposite of that is in trying to deal with insurance. So we are private pay. Our families know that straight out of the gate. We do provide our families with documentation for them to seek reimbursement on their own. So each month, a family is provided with a super bill that has all of their ICD-10s, CPTs, MPIs, all that jazz, as well as their tax ID, as well as a summary of progress. And then it is up to the family if they want to submit for reimbursement to their insurance company. I do have some insurance companies that require specific modifiers, so I'll assist families with that. But other than that, it's out of our wheelhouse at the moment. We also have families, make sure that they contact their insurance company to see if a pre-authorization is required for services. And if it is, we'll complete our initial evaluation or reevaluation and then submit that documentation. But that's pretty much the extent of our foray into the insurance world.
Mel, you kind of really hit the nail on the head with the hammer, so to speak, because I can tell you, so I handle 100% of the insurance authorizations through Skyline, and we're 99% reimbursement through insurance, and it is a full-time job. It's insane. And I'm sure probably
that you have to have the knowledge of the insurance world. Just props to you, Nita. Props to you.
Thanks. No, but it really is. But when you touched base on the whole thing about manpower, that's a key thing right there, because just as you said, to have somebody with that knowledge base and to understand the ins and outs of the insurance, just even within your state or your region, and what's required, and be able to answer people's questions and stuff, it can be challenging to find, let's say, an outside employee to bring in that has that knowledge base, and then be able to pay them for their knowledge base. I think that's probably why it's fallen on me a little bit at Skyline, or it's come within our family, because we negotiate our rates differently. But yeah, that's a real challenge that I think people come across. So Cass, you also do insurance reimbursement. Tell us a little bit about some of the ins and outs of that at Leaps and Bounds.
Yeah, when I first started, so many cash pay practices are so popular right now, especially in California. A lot of people are doing them. I don't live in a community where we would have a lot of clients. If that were the case, we have all of the children are disadvantaged out here. And I think that initially I had a billing company, so I outsourced it, and that for me was the easiest way to start. I don't know anything about this, and I will tell you, I learned very expensive lessons with this billing company, but I just
Nice
call
way to put it.
the school of hard knocks, and you learn what not to do. But I didn't really have any other choice because it was just me. I had no knowledge of insurance billing. So I also jumped in with a ton of networks to be in network to figure out what that meant. And then sort of started to pick and choose as we established ourselves, established our reputation for referrals and such. So jumped out of network with some where the reimbursement rate was a little bit better, and navigating all of that. Someone once told me a good marker in the PT world, at least, is when you're billing $1 million in revenue, that's when you should bring somebody in-house and it's their full-time job. And that kind of worked if you're billing gross charges, not net. So when we hit that, we had started with somebody in-house part-time who fortunately understood the PT billing world and helped with that. Our attorney has spent, I think, right out of the gate, the best, if you're going to own a business, the best friend you can have is an attorney. You hope you never need them, but you really have to bring on somebody who knows you and knows what you're doing and can advise you from the beginning, so that when you do need representation, they're right there ready to jump in. They already know your model. So I was fortunate enough to meet a fantastic healthcare attorney who understood the use of the horse in our treatment. He understands all of the language in contracts, understands that we don't do hippotherapy, and he understands the terminology, and so is very supportive of how we bill, has guided our billing department, sort of helped establish our billing department really, and our policies and procedures.
That's wonderful that you found someone who had such a strong understanding of those things, because that's really essential to any practice, PT, OT, or speech that's incorporating equine movement, to have the support of someone who maybe isn't directly involved as a therapist or have a therapy background, but that really understands those things, because it can make or break you.
Yes. Expensive lessons.
Yes, for sure.
It's a great tagline for this live. Expensive.
Yep.
Expensive lessons. I love it. Ruth, what do you have to say on reimbursement?
Well, you have to understand that, I'm the dinosaur in this group. Okay. I've been doing this since some of you weren't even a gleam in somebody's eye. Okay.
The pioneer.
So yeah, right. So I have watched the reimbursement, the healthcare and health insurance industry move through many, many, many phases. Back when I started, there were no HMOs, there were no networks. It was all very just cut and dry health plans. There weren't a lot of pre-authorizations required. And the good thing about that, and I've been reimbursed through insurance from day one, but it was actually, I could evolve with the process a little bit. I have to laugh. I remember when managed care came into the picture and I was like, oh, that'll never work. And actually it's here to stay. But, and I do, you do learn things sometimes in an expensive fashion, but there's so many resources for you as therapy professionals through your national therapy associations. All three of our national associations here in the United States have private practice committees, private practice resources for you. And it's important, because even if you hire that person to come in and do pre-authorizations and to handle billing and whatnot, if you don't understand the process, you can really get burned. And so it's important that you do understand that process. And, I think the other thing is that you don't have to be all one way or the other as you get started. It's perfectly okay to be on a cash basis. And then when there's kind of a user-friendly insurance company in your area that you can sign up with and kind of learn as you go. You doesn't have to be all one way or all the other way as you're moving through the process. I think the other thing is that, as Cassandra pointed out, in her case, case, creating the side-by-side was necessary because the reimbursement rates didn't support that specialty tool. It's important to know what the reimbursement culture is in your state, in your area. Because really what you're doing, regardless of the horses, is you're going into private practice, period. Approach it as a business. That's what you're doing. And educate yourself. And then figure out what the budget concerns are of adding the horse, of adding the support staff that you need for that. And, you have to be creative sometimes. I mean, I've gotten very creative in the way we do our bookkeeping and the way we use our EMR system so that I could eliminate the billing person, because financially it's just better for me to have a smaller network. And so, yeah, there's lots of different ways to structure it.
Yeah, Ruth, I really liked what you said about, at the end of the day, it's you're going into business and you're opening a private practice. And I was thinking too about what Cass was saying about accessibility. And, all of us as treating therapists know how incredibly powerful of a tool hippotherapy is. And we want everyone who has access to it physically to have access to it financially, right? It shouldn't be just a tool, shouldn't make treatment, like it shouldn't put a barrier for treatment. It should be affordable the same way, comparable to the rates for any private practice in the area. And it sounds like the way that all of you have set things up has been in an effort to make sure that it's accessible to everyone, regardless of the fact that there might be a horse involved for movement purposes.
Well, and I think you can be creative. I mean, I always think about, like Cassandra, you're actually the one that I have heard talk about creating an additional small fee for the incorporation of the horse into a patient's treatment plan, an equipment fee or a specialty tool fee. And as long as your language is set up so that that is passed on to every patient and you're being fair across the board, that's a wonderful way to offset it. If that's $25, if you family, if you want hippotherapy as part of your treatment plan, it will be an additional $25 to your copay, for example. And then you have to look at your demographics. Sadly, here in New Mexico, people wouldn't be able to do that because so many of them are depending on Medicaid, and I can't pass on that fee to them. So again, it's about figuring out, I think the biggest mistake people make is they don't figure out how many therapy sessions they have to do to pay the bills, what their break-even point is. And then the more therapy you do, the less you have, it lowers that break-even point so that you have more net to work with. And all that's just business stuff. And, you can be creative in how you structure your setting so that it doesn't break the bank to include the horse.
Yeah, I actually, I had the privilege of having Ruth as my level 1 instructor. And I think hearing her speak about the business model, whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit, everything we're in private practice. It doesn't matter what you're coded as. You should be running that as a business. Even a nonprofit must have a profit margin. It just means it doesn't go back into one person's pocket. It goes back into the mission. So both, I think a lot of times a nonprofit gets into trouble when they think, everybody sets out with good intentions and we want to just raise a little bit of money and do good with it and give it away. And there's no business sense applied. So the business aspect is incredibly important. And we do bill a fee, and running that by your attorney as far as what the language is. It can't necessarily be a location fee for us. So you have to look into your insurance contracts and your city, your state, if there's anything that would be a barrier. But our attorney has helped us determine it's for us in general, it's called a fee for non-covered service. And that allows us to apply it to anybody. And so it is the use of it's a combination of the facility, the horse, everything. And we have to be careful because it's not a separate service, but it's if we are going to use hippotherapy as part of it, that is the additional $25. And all your patients have to do is sign a form that they understand that is an additional cost. We think this is the best tool to use with you. There is an additional cost. And then through the nonprofit, we do have ways to mitigate that cost as well if people can't afford that as part of their plan.
It's such a really, truly creative way of going about it.
I actually borrowed that from our
So-
adult world. There's a lot of lessons we can learn from. I think probably all of us who work in pediatrics or even neuro get a little frustrated with business courses because so often the strategies are to see 4 patients at once and overlapping them here and there, and they don't really apply to our setting where we have to be one-on-one and a bit more hands-on. But that was when they started introducing so many cool tools as far as instrumented assisted soft tissue mob, which are basically like they look like razor blades that you're using, new fancy tools, body weight supported treadmill systems, the AlterG treadmill, and all these practices who introduced this really amazing tool that is state of the art has started billing a non-covered service fee for it. So it's a standard and accepted practice in the therapy world in general.
Ruth, let's jump into actually all of you. This is going to be kind of directed to all of you. Let's jump into talking about how you pay your therapist, how your therapist set up. Are they contracted? Are they, employees, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah, I think a big important part of like what everyone just kind of touched on, even when we were talking about reimbursement and things like that, we talked about, like Cass touched on the importance of having an attorney who really understood everything and making sure that you're really building your team the best way. So I think Nita, it makes sense to talk about that, talking about not just your therapists, but your entire team at your facility.
So I've tried it every way in the world. I'm here to tell you the formula I've got right now works for me. So I pay my therapists. Everybody's an employee. I don't have any contract help at all. My therapists are paid on what we call a direct treatment hour basis. So basically they have an hourly rate they get for every patient that they see. And that has helped me because when I had them on salary, if we were shut down for 2 weeks because of snow or something like that happened, I was carrying the burden of their salaries, and there wasn't really a lot of motivation on their part to necessarily reschedule those patients. But now that they're a little more vested as therapy professionals in how many sessions we do every week because they get paid for what they produce. But I take out their taxes and I pay half their health insurance, and they're treated very much as employees. Then I don't use any volunteers. I have 6 full-time paid horse professionals that work for me, and they too are on an hourly rate. And so that has been a really workable thing for me because as a small practice, I mean, we see, in contrast to the 1,100 a week, we do about 250 hours of therapy a week. So we're, much smaller proportionately, but it allows me to make sure that I can pay competitive wages, because you can love this as much as you want, but if you can make a lot more money down the road, you're probably eventually going to go there. So I'm proud to say that my therapy professionals all make competitive salaries with the national averages in their discipline, PTOT and speech. And I've worked really hard to get all of my horse staff up to, good, solid, livable wages as well. And then both as a horsewoman and as a therapist, I am not vested in using a volunteer model. I just want a lot more quality control. And kudos to those of you that can make volunteers work. It's not in my repertoire to do that well. So that's how we're set up.
So I'll go next because I am all volunteers. That is very much me manpower.
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
all of my therapists are also employees of Mainstream. We, prior to this lovely thing, not sure if you heard of it, called COVID-19, we were very fortunate to have 2 to 3 therapists in every discipline and treating the most that our facility has ever done. And then the pandemic hit. And so we are still slowly trying to build up from that, because the same thing, people had to go where they could make the money. And if we couldn't, treat because of XYZ, things just got really tough. So we're in the process of building up from that. But, the volunteer model is what our organization has done for 50 years. And so, part of that quality control was a really great way to put that, Ruth, because, if I have a great horse handler, but they want to go on vacation. They're not paid. They have every right to go to, I don't know, Turks and Caicos for a month, or, maybe they have surgery and they're out. So that is definitely a hard part of using volunteers. The same, or not really the same token, but I think there's a lot of pride that my volunteers have in working with the different clients. And, we talk about confidentiality, we talk about HIPAA, but for them to be in someone's session and to, see them walk from the door to the mounting area for the first time, or to hear someone, utter their first couple phrases, it means, for us, we're like, oh, wow, that's awesome. But for them, it's absolutely incredible. And, I started this journey as a camper, but at the ripe old age of, I'm not going to say it, in 1998, I started in this whole industry as a volunteer. So I think that there's a lot of pros to having volunteers if you're set up that way. And then, in addition to being a non-for-profit and a full-fledged not-profit organization, I have a whole staff behind me. So I have an executive director, I have a volunteer coordinator, I have an equine manager, I have a marketing person. So I have a whole slew of other people on my team, which is really, really great.
It sounds really great. And you have a really good support system. So Cass, can you talk a little bit about your setup with your therapists and horse handlers and other team members?
Yes, definitely. We utilize a mix. So we have our core paid staff, and we're working really hard to get those wages up. It is hard. So that is something I'm going to need to really look at Ruth's model for. But then those core staff are really in charge of the volunteers. And same thing, we have a lot of volunteers who take a lot of pride in being there, and they treat it very much like a job. And they sign in, sign out. Now you have to be very careful with the laws in California, especially if it appears that they're doing the exact same job as your paid staff, you will owe them back wages. So we have to be careful of that in California. So there are certain duties that only our paid staff can do. Only our paid staff can train and exercise the horses and do the ongoing education. So there's very separate duties list between volunteers and paid staff.
Excellent. That's awesome. So I like the way that you divide all of those things up. And speaking of dividing things up, Mel, can we bounce back to you for 1 second?
Absolutely.
So I know Mainstream is, correct me, but is Mainstream also a PATH center?
Yep. So Mainstream is we're a premier accredited center. So there's two different facility types with PATH. You can be a member center or you can be a premier accredited center. And premier accredited means that you meet their standards. So every couple years, PATH puts out what's called hold on, I have it right here. Let me just look at it real quick. The PATH International Standards for Certification and Accreditation. And every 5 years, we go through a reaccreditation process where someone from the PATH office comes out and we need to demonstrate to them that we meet their standards. So their standards run the gamut across the board, from administrative to facility, making sure you have fire extinguishers, making sure you're accessible to someone with a disability. They do have a section for incorporating hippotherapy into your treatment. So we need to demonstrate that we meet those standards as well. Because we are doing our 50th, I want to say we were first accredited in 82 or 89, something like that. So that was kind of cool to figure out as our 50th anniversary journey continues. But for the way that I kind of see it, especially because the facility that I'm at does both adaptive riding and therapy services, it's a great resource primarily for adaptive riding, but also for us, with the precautions and contraindications. I use that a lot when I'm talking to families or I'm trying to explain something to someone. I find that to be a really great resource.
Oh, that sounds like it works really well for you. Could you tell me a little bit about how marketing looks in that kind of structure with, having the PATH center? Are you marketing together? Are you marketing separately? What does that look like?
Yeah. So our marketing person, I'll give a shout out to her. Her name is Louisa, and she is fantastic. She came to us and had a lot of learning to do. Really, equine therapy. Nope. I'm going to stop you right there, Louisa. She does a really great job of making sure that When she's talking about adaptive riding, that is the language she is using. That is the hat we are wearing in that post or that story or what have you. And then switching over to therapy. Where I would say the waters get kind of murky is, when we're not marketing towards donors, but people who don't really understand and they don't see the difference. So then we as professionals, and especially me and my, I feel like my coworkers hate when I get on my little soapbox about things, but we donors and other stakeholders are the ones that we really need to do a great job of being very specific in the words that we use. So if we're marketing for our adaptive riding program, sure, they're incorporating core strength, but that's not the goal, right? Their goal is to learn how to ride a horse. And all of our instructors there are really great at using that verbiage. A parent will come in, oh, I want to work on their core strength. Nope, that's not what we do. We are going to teach your kid how to ride a horse, versus me, where I can use the words like that in the social media marketing or the print marketing that we do. So it's a lot of teamwork. A lot of times we all look at things multiple times, and they'll go to put something out for an event or something, and then I'll put my 2 cents in. So it's a great teamwork in marketing. If that helped, did that answer? Maybe.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It really does sound like it. And what I hear is kind of like a running theme, even through this entire conversation. I know we're not specifically talking about terminology today, but it's kind of unavoidable when we
always talking about terminology.
We are always talking about terminology. So I'm even thinking back to when we were talking before about the legality and the way that we were setting the practices up and making sure that we were using the right words, right? Ruth, you talked about that a little bit too.
It's imperative that you use the right words, because 99% of the problems that you will have, you can probably trace them back to the misperception about what you're actually doing. So even in your casual conversation in your own facility, you need to use the right words. It's very important.
Yeah. Cass, do you feel that way too? Do you feel like that's something you run into when you're marketing your practice?
Yes, definitely. We do also offer adaptive riding, and that is through the nonprofit handles that. And so the word choice is really difficult, and same that Mel described. We have to do a lot of work with that with our marketing director, and she gets it now. And so it's just a constant daily. And I think it is critical to talk about, even though that's not the topic of this conversation. It is getting down to business, because you're going to get a denial for improper terminology. You are going to lose money if you have improper terminology. You are not going to properly describe your services. So it's constant education of our donors, our supporters, and those seeking. Also our front desk staff, every single person who answers the phone, they have to know, they have to catch people. Oh, hi, I'm signing up for hippotherapy. Oh, well, let me tell you the differences. So everybody has to be aware of it. And the marketing starts with that phone call and our website. And it's a constant battle. We're looking at our website constantly, like, oh my gosh, we've got to change this now. Oh, we've got to change that. And it's very hard, because we just opened our second location, and it's down in Corona, which is much more metropolitan. And everyone says, oh, are the horses there? And I go, oh, well, if you know Corona, there's no horses there. It's the middle of a city. No, we don't just do horse therapy. We are a private practice. So that has actually helped bring the message, our separate clinic where, wait, I thought Leaps and Bounds was just horse therapy. It's the sparkly thing that we do that everybody loves, but it's not everything that we do. So that message is critical.
And can I add a little something there too? Your families are going to come to you, and they're coming to you because you do offer this specialty tool, hippotherapy, equine movement as a treatment tool. And the verbiage gets very, very sloppy. How many times people call us up and I'm very interested in getting horse therapy for my son or daughter. And you have to take the time to give your families the right information. And it starts from the very first phone call, the very first interaction with them. Well, let me tell you about Skyline. We're a pediatric practice. We offer PTOT and speech. We specialize in equine movement. And you have to keep driving that home, because what has happened is across the spectrum of this country, and in fact the world, there's so much confusion about what is adaptive riding, what is treatment using the horse. There is no such thing as equine therapy or horse therapy or equine facilitated therapy. Horses don't do therapy. We do therapy. And it's very important that anybody out there using this tool not be part of the problem, but help to reduce the problem by being dedicated in your marketing, in your verbiage, in your documentation, and everything. And I mean, that's all I'll say about terminology, but it is probably one of your biggest things that you need to hone in on.
Yeah.
Well, and I know
Down too, like Mel was saying before about her family submit for insurance reimbursement. If they're not using the correct terminology because we're not using the correct terminology, or someone else at the practice isn't using correct terminology, they're not going to be reimbursed for services, and they may not be able to continue to come to your practice at all. And it also ends up with us in battles with insurance companies who are misinformed, who it's an ongoing battle in so many different ways.
Well, and it's
Another-
an ongoing battle too with the families themselves. So what I find easiest is I have, a lot of our referrals come from email. So someone will email me, oh, I'm interested in blah, blah, blah. So I have an email that I have copied and pasted over and over and over that has my whole little spiel. Great, I've had this client for 2 years. And then they'll email me, hey, it's President's Day. Do we have writing today?
Yeah, it happens all the
Thank you
time.
so much. Language pathology services for today and you're just constantly reminding people, and it's like Ruth said, it's an ongoing battle that we are all willing to fight.
Yes.
Yes. And I think another part of that marketing piece, I know for sure, like with any facility where they are billing for insurance is, so in New Mexico, in order, the kind of requirement for that the insurance companies have is that for any we're an open access state. So we don't actually have to have a doctor's referral to do PT, OT, or speech therapy. However, if we want to get reimbursed by their insurance, the insurance companies require that we have a doctor's order on file. And that is a huge referral source for us. We're constantly getting referrals from the doctor's offices. And I can't tell you how many times on a weekly basis I get referrals for hippotherapy. And we are constantly educating the doctors in the greater, Albuquerque metropolitan area and surrounding, towns that it's not hippotherapy, can't provide, hippotherapy. I would love to provide speech therapy, occupational therapy, or physical therapy if that's what you're interested in. And even so, educating the doctor's offices and their referral nurses is a huge piece of that marketing aspect, I think.
Definitely. If you guys don't mind putting a quick pause on things for a second, we actually had a question come through in the chat that I'd love to pull up on the screen. So Leslie, please forgive me if I butcher your name, but Leslie Schroed Hayden just asked, is anyone billing insurance for therapy using equine movement in states where hippotherapy is excluded in most policies? And I felt like this was a great question to pull to the forefront just before we transition off this topic.
Yeah, definitely with this conversation as well. It's critical. It's terminology. So I'll address that. I do work with plans where hippotherapy is specifically excluded. Now, I work extremely closely with my attorney who reviews this contract and is prepared to defend me should anything happen. I serve on the American Hippotherapy Association Ethics, Advocacy, and Reimbursement Committee. We talk about these things all the time. People reach out to us and help. Somebody's trying to take, an insurance company wants to take back all the money they paid me for these sessions because they found out I'm doing hippotherapy. And we say, that's because you're not doing hippotherapy. Do not have it in a prescription. Do not bill the code that is out there floating around that's associated with it. You do not do hippotherapy. So my stance, and this is backed by my attorney who knows my practice and how we do our documentation, is that that's great. Kaiser can deny hippotherapy all they want. You don't do hippotherapy. You do physical therapy. You do speech therapy. You do occupational therapy. You do 97535, 97530, your CPT codes. You don't do hippotherapy. So his stance is, doesn't apply to you at all. Just ignore it.
And but if you're going to ignore it, you have to then be very, very certain that you are following your Practice Act and all the conventions that go with that. So you need to be auditable in your documentation. You need to be auditable. You need to, if somebody comes and pays a site visit, it must not look like the only tool you have available is a horse. You need to it needs to be integrated into the broader spectrum of the speech and language or PT or OT that you're providing. And it really comes down to not a lot of times it's what you say you are doing. And so the other thing you need to know is that, just a little plug for the EA&R committee that Cassie and I are both on right now, there are only 13 states that actually have policy language in their state Medicaids excluding hippotherapy services. And that's the caveat. It's hippotherapy services. So, and actually the other 37 states don't have any policy language. And so if you're running into problems, the EA&R committee actually is there to give you some guidance. This is also going to be discussed quite a bit at the conference this year. So but Cassie just nailed it. You're not doing hippotherapy. Just be sure that your marketing doesn't say you're doing hippotherapy. Don't be advertising your hippotherapy sessions or your hippotherapy program, because then you're setting yourself up for those insurance companies to say, hey, yeah, but look what you said you were doing.
And that even comes down to pictures too, right? When you're marketing with pictures, you just can't have pictures of horses, right? Even if, we do a lot outside. I get that my kids spend a lot of times in four walls. So let's go on a scavenger hunt, right? There's no horse involved. We're going on a scavenger hunt, right? You need to have pictures of not just the horse too.
Right.
Yeah. And that goes back a little bit to what Ruth was just saying about if you did have a site visit, that you want to make sure that anyone who were to come see sees what you're actually doing, which is therapy. And I mean, realistically, if anyone were to come to an indoor clinic space and the only thing you ever did was put your client on a swing,
you'd have a problem.
You'd have a huge problem, right? So I think that that's an important piece about setting up the practices too, to make sure that you really are incorporating it into a total plan of care with multiple tools. So
and I think you also need. Sorry, Kate.
No, go ahead, Nita.
You also need to make sure that your documentation is reflecting the service you're providing, and you're not talking about in your SOAP notes your what horse little Katie rode and what tack you used. And, your SOAP notes need to reflect your best practice standards, and you need to talk about the goals you're treating. And honestly, the tools are irrelevant. It's not up to the insurance companies to be able to know or what tools you're using in order for your child to be able to achieve their best communication. It's simply maybe the level of support you're providing and what their goals are. And so, not referring to your hippotherapy in your documentation is a key aspect to that as well.
Yeah.
I think that's part of.
Yeah, you're not hiding it. You're just being standard, because in order to understand, the term hippotherapy has become problematic because we as a group have misused it, quite frankly. We have been the problem, and we're trying to fix that now. And so it's very, very important that you look at the information that AHA has out there on documentation and what words to use, and be aware that it doesn't, if you wouldn't, we used to laugh, if you wouldn't say it about a therapy ball, don't say it about a horse. We don't usually do a whole litany of every little tool. I certainly have never put that I played Candyland to work on language concepts in a treatment note. So, you have to be smart about it. And it's a standard practice tool. You're not doing anything wrong if you're incorporating equine movement as a treatment tool.
Yeah. And speaking of tools, Ruth, we just had this other question from Alicia, forgive me for butchering your name as well, but Alicia Aldendorf, asking about whether insurance companies are pushing back on these other tools the way they push back on the use of hippotherapy as part of a total plan of care. Is this something unique to us?
Well, there's an interesting thing about this. That's because hippotherapy over the years, it started out as a tool. And then we got sloppy. We didn't realize what could happen to us. And we started referring to it as a strategy. Mm-hmm. And the language got looser and looser. And it morphed into something that the insurance companies could attack. They don't really attack tools as a general rule. They attack approaches. They attack very specific protocols. And there are other protocols that, for sure, that the insurance companies will target. And then I do think in the world of physical therapy in particular, and Cassie, you should speak to that. You were talking about some of these new specialty tools that have been introduced in physical therapy that they are excluded, right?
Yes.
And so, so it's not just about hippotherapy.
Yes, and I think the aquatic section of the APTA, they've done a lot of work on this because the aquatic section sort of fell into that trap as well and offering it as a separate service instead of the water and the environment being a tool. So, Alicia, yeah, and to take it to the next level with that question from the legal contest, that's where my legal support goes is okay, they can question you on the use of that horse. I want to see a pattern that they question every provider on every tool that they use.
Exactly.
We don't say what color therapy we use each day. We don't say how far we push the swing or what type of swing we used. We don't say the size and color of the therapy ball. We don't, say necessarily all of the details of the tools we use to perform the procedure that we build. So they can't prove that they do that to everybody.
They don't. And so what happens is they actually can be accused of being arbitrary and capricious in their attack on hippotherapy as a treatment tool. What happens is it strikes the fear note in all of us, and then we cave. So this isn't necessarily for the faint-hearted, but you need to know that you've got your national therapy associations behind you, you've got AHA behind you, and you've really got the healthcare standards behind you, because as Cassie said, they don't do that for every tool. So it's not appropriate for them to target this tool. But if you're referring to it as a service or a program or a strategy, you're setting yourself up for hurt. It's very simple. It's equine movement is a treatment tool, period.
And I think it's really great, Ruth, that you kind of recognize like AHA as a whole, like we kind of did this to ourselves, and we've already made this mistake once for everybody. Please, help us not make that mistake again.
Yeah. So we just did a ton of talking about insurance reimbursement and all of that. And what we failed to touch on was insurance coverage for your facility. So before we're done talking about insurance, let's switch gears and talk about this kind. Mel, would you like to start talking about it?
Sure. I love insurance. Sounds great. So I will say, I do not have a lot of experience in this side of it because of the setup of my facility. I'm not the one who handles it. I'm not the one who has to pick it. I'm not the one who has to call the insurance companies when someone drove through the fence and destroyed our property early this year. You know what I mean? I don't handle all that. So from the question that I did ask my executive director, we basically have, a couple policies that cover our equipment, covers our property, covers the people on our property and things like that. The general recommendation is also for therapists to have their own insurance when working in this type of industry. You can never have too much. You can always, protect yourself in that respect. So I don't really have a lot to say because I don't deal with it. So next.
I actually do, and I do it all myself. I happen to be married to the president of insurance underwriting for a gigantic insurance company, so I have that, and so that's what I would encourage everybody to do. If you don't have the knowledge, reach out to someone who does. And if I didn't, Miriam,
I thought you were going to say.
What he did, I see it in your dating apps now. What he did was set me up with a broker who said, come out, see what we do. This is what we do. What areas are we at risk? What policies do we need? So if you know nothing, reach out to somebody who knows more about this than you do. Brokers are not going to try to oversell you insurance. There's no such thing as overselling insurance. We need all these policies. They're going to adequately assess what you do and determine what coverage you need. So yeah, equine liability. We have a volunteer policy. We have medical malpractice. We have general liability that covers property, all kinds of things. And they will follow you around for a day and ask what each person does. Workers' comp, obviously. So all of these things. And a broker will really help guide you on that.
So, yeah, and there's a couple of little things to know. So I think one of the questions that was actually asked in the chat from Carol Hugel was what liability insurance that we all use. And for example, Skyline has a group policy with HPSO, which is important for you all to know because AHA has worked hard to develop a relationship with HPSO. and they understand that hippotherapy is a treatment tool within our standard practice as PTs, OTs, and SLPs. And so that battle has already been fought for you. Just as by the way, what we do, because our horse handlers are going to have patient contact, they might actually be, they're all trained to sidewalk in case we need extra help or whatever. I have, you list all your therapists, but they're all listed, the horse staff are listed as therapy aides on the policy. And so that just helps to keep things smooth. And then certainly your general business liability, farm and ranch. I have because Skyline leases the facility from my husband and I, we have a farm and ranch policy that covers a lot of things. And then your workers' comp, and it's figuring out, but on your workers' comp, and this is something, and I don't know how, you have to be careful how you're set up, because for example, my workers' comp, rates are less because I am rated as a pediatric therapy clinic and not as an equestrian facility. And so that has a lot to do with the way you identify your industry with your NACS number, your industry code. And like I'm offices of PTs, OTs, speech pathologists, and audiologists. That's what my industry is. So I just hope that helps.
Oh, I think it's incredibly helpful. And I think that that's a very challenging point for everyone. So I think insurance in general, it's just a stressful thing for all therapists, whether it's.
You just need to marry somebody. You just need to marry somebody who knows about it, and then that solves all your problems.
Solution.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
That's the clear solution.
Oh, that's great.
So we're just getting ready to kind of wrap up the discussion. We just put out a little call for questions. If in case anybody didn't see it, we're just getting ready to finish up. So if you have any questions for our guests today, please make sure to put them in. But we just wanted to talk very quickly about any recommendations that you guys might have for someone who is interested in starting their own business, maybe a therapist who's just starting out, looking to contract somewhere, or even someone looking to work at a facility that also also provides adaptive riding and things like that. So who would like to go first?
I mean, I'll take a stab at it and also do a conference plug at the same time. So I think partnering and working at a PATH facility are kind of two separate roads to go down. Like right now, I'm looking for some additional therapists. And so that's one part of it. I have out my job descriptions. Okay, great. So you're not really creating anything. You're basically working for me. The flip side of that is if you're looking to partner with a facility and bring a therapy program or a therapy practice to an adaptive riding center or a PATH facility. And so one of the presentations that myself and Gina Taylor are doing at conference is about doing that. What are the pros and cons of partnering with a PATH facility and things like that. So that is a larger conversation, and I don't think I'm going at the same time as anybody else. So I highly encourage everybody to attend that presentation as well as all the other presentations that are happening.
Yeah, there's actually going to be a couple of presentations at the conference that are very business driven. So that and whether you're in live or whether you're attending it virtually, those are presentations that you really need to do. Something else to think about is, besides having a good relationship with an attorney, is develop a good relationship with a banker. Have your banker be vested in what you're doing, because probably the smartest thing I ever did was invite my banker out to see what we did, to have confidence in what we were doing so that I could establish a nice, solid credit line. So that, because I always look great on paper. Financially, we look great on paper. The cash flow can be a little challenging sometimes because insurance companies just let everything in the world create a hiccup so that they don't want to pay you timely. And so I've had to draw on that line some and, keep things moving and then pay it back. And so that's something. And even if you're very small, you can I started out with a very small credit line, but it definitely saved my butt a number of times. And the other thing is that you don't have to jump in 100%. You don't have to quit your day job and say, okay, as of tomorrow, I am in private practice using hippotherapy in my practice. And you can stair step your way into it. You can start out by, establishing a relationship with an existing equestrian facility and doing a little bit of contract work, or develop develop slowly, and don't be afraid. I mean, I've been doing it for 40 years, and it's the most amazing adventure that I've ever had. And by golly, I drug my 2 daughters into it. I mean, yeah, well, and who knew that Nita was going to be a marine biologist, and here she is. And Eva was going to be a photojournalist, and there she is. She's a speech pathologist too. So, don't be afraid.
Yeah, I love that. When I first started, actually, and I had heard somebody spoke at APTA Combined Sections meeting at a tiny little offshoot, and I heard about hippotherapy, and I thought, oh, well, this is up my alley. I grew up in we're called Horsetown, USA. That is trademarked for Norco, which is funny. There was a therapeutic riding facility that opened up about 6 months before me, and I went down and said, hey, I'm just going to join up with them. They're a PATH Premier Center, and I did not like what I saw. I did a tour and I said, oh, what are they? They clearly did not understand the difference between being a physical therapist and offering their therapeutic riding. It was very scary and very apparent. And so I said, well, I guess I got to do this on my own. And to Ruth's point, I saw 1 or 2 patients on the side. I kept my day jobs. I kept all of them. I did it after hours. I built up slowly. And I think I needed 6 patients to quit one of my jobs. And I was like waiting for 8 months for that. And then it happened. And here we are 10 years later, I've got 1,176 employees. So it's like, it can happen, and it can be as big or small as you want it to be. And don't be afraid. I also took so much education through the AHA courses and had people like Ruth lead us and teach us the proper way to do it, and follow them. Go buy them a coffee and see if you can help them out for a day. I did that out here in California, and attend every single seminar you possibly can to learn how to do it the right way. Attend conference, attend your national conferences, and speak to other people. There's a lot of resources available.
And the one thing too, I think, Ruth, you touched on it a little bit before, is have a business plan. You're a business, right? You need to have that plan. You need to have those resources to create your business, especially on the nonprofit side. I think a lot of people get caught up in the horses are magical and do wonderful things side of it, and not remembering that you are first and foremost a business that has to have money to keep these animals alive and these people working for you. So don't quit your day job. Have a business plan. Talk to AHA.
Right. And to that end, there will be a presentation at the conference that the EANR committee has put together on business basics and some updates in reimbursement. And it is very much business basics, but there will be some scenarios with solutions and some very general information on how to calculate a basic break even and what that looks like, what a small practice looks like, and how they might expand, and just to kind of get you started. So I guess I'm doing my shameless plug for the conference as well, but that talk should be very helpful for people that are trying to make the jump.
Yeah, I think, especially for people like Jillian, who posted this question here, that reaching a point where you could make the jump to full time and feeling like you're right on the edge there. And I think that what Ruth was saying before about not being afraid is an important point, but making sure you're still supporting yourself. Does anybody else want to say anything else about this question?
Yeah, calculate objective measures. How many patients do you need? Do the math backwards. What am I going to get reimbursed for that? What are my expenses going to be? And do the math backwards. I still use this today. Oh gosh, our OT wait list is growing. We need to hire an OT. Okay, but do we? I know that I need X number of patients to break even on that staff. So know those numbers, and it makes it really easy to jump into then once you have some data behind what you're doing.
Absolutely. Run it like a business, whether you're by yourself or whether you have 76 employees. Run it like a business. That's what it is. The tool is just a tool. You are going into private practice. That is what you're doing.
Well, I think we're getting close to our wrap-up time here. It's been so great to hear all of you guys speak on all of these hot topics. And I'm sure it's, probably going to bring up even more questions on our Facebook forums moving forward. But I've really enjoyed hearing all of you guys speak today. I think our listeners have too. Thank you all so much for agreeing to be here with us on a Saturday.
Yay.
And thank you to everyone who logged in to watch live and participate and ask questions. Whenever anyone logs in to ask questions, especially, I mean, we had people all over the world here today, and we just
Egypt.
appreciate
That
you.
was so cool.
I
Hello,
know.
Egypt.
But it really does help enhance the conversation when you ask specific questions, and it's important to us as an organization that we're talking about things that are meaningful to all of you. That's the whole point of social media and our outreach here. So we're so excited that this went so well, and thank you to all of you guys for participating.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
And
Can't wait
be
to
sure
see
everyone at
everyone in
conference.
person. 2 short weeks.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
Well, until next time.
yes, go ahead, Nita. Sorry. We're all excited.
Always so awkward to end these things because I don't think anyone really wants it to be over. All right. Well, until next time, guys, stay live.